This is a Voters Decide special report, the debate for the Denver mayor's runoff race.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Welcome to Regis University. We are excited to have all of you here in person and, of course, our online audience. Thank you for joining us. To officially welcome everybody and start off our debate, may I introduce you to the president of Regis University, Dr. Salvador Aceves.
Good evening and welcome to Regis University. My name is Salvador Aceves, and as president of this Jesuit Catholic institution, which as of March 30th of this year became the first private institution in Colorado designated as Hispanic serving, we are committed to honest and authentic dialogue and conversation. Serving, our founder, St. Ignatius of Loyola, advised listening closely to all sides in order to hear beyond our own biases and be humble even when we believe we are certain. Let us all reflect thoughtfully on the vision of the candidates that are joining us this evening. And as is customary, we begin these proceedings with a land and labor acknowledgement. Regis University recognizes the indigenous people are the original stewards of the land we stand on today. We respectfully acknowledge that this land is the homeland of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations. We also recognize that this nation has benefited and profited from forced and trafficked labor of enslaved Africans, immigrants, and refugee communities of color. La Universidad de Regis reconoce que los pueblos indígenas son los administradores originales de las tierras de que nos encontramos hoy. Reconocemos respetuosamente que esta tierra es la patria de las naciones Arapaho, Cheyenne y Ute. También reconocemos que esta nación ha obtenido beneficios y ganancias a través del trabajo forzado o traficado de africanos esclavizados, así como de comunidades de inmigrantes y refugiados de color. We thank Mr. Johnston and Ms. Brough for being here this evening, and so now please welcome our moderator, Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Aceves. It's wonderful to have you here. And thank you to all of you who are joining us for this Denver Mayoral Runoff Debate. We're excited to be able to feature this program to all of you. Let me officially allow all of you to help welcome our candidates, Kelly Brough and Mike Johnston. And joining me moderating today's debate, asking all the questions, doing the heavy lifting today, Sean Boyd, political specialist from CBS News Colorado, David Sabatos, publisher of the Denver North Star. So let me set a few ground rules for tonight's debate. We have our live audience here at Regis and, of course, our online audience at home or wherever you may be viewing from. It's a 60-minute debate. We won't have any opening statements. We'll go right into questions. We'll be covering a variety of topics throughout the evening. Sometimes we'll offer at least 2 questions, sometimes a little bit more. We'll ask for a 1-minute, a 60-second answer to each of our questions. We will allow a 30-second rebuttal and a 30-second refutation of said rebuttal. We will have a 1-minute closing statement at the end of the debate. We decided that order at with the coin flip before the debate, and we'll get to that at the very end. For our audience, I will ask you to please remain quiet and silent as we respect our candidates here, giving them the time to share the information and their takes on these questions with all of us. But don't worry, I'll give you a chance at the end of the debate so we can thank both of them properly. Okay, I think we've covered the ground rules. One important FYI to all of our Denver voters out there, Election Day is June 6th. The mail-in ballots get mailed out May 15th. So this is a very timely debate and a great conversation to have. I think we can get to it. Let's get to our first topic. Tonight, we will start with affordable housing. And Sean, you'll ask our first question.
Thanks, Dominic. So Governor Polis's affordable housing bill failed in the state legislature, as I'm sure both of you know, because of pushback from cities that didn't want the state dictating land use. That aside, do you agree with the premise of the bill that cities should approve more ADUs and multiplex housing in residential areas and more apartments, condos, and townhomes along transit corridors? And how do you balance that density with open space and quality of life? Kelly, you want to get us started?
Sure, thanks. Thanks for being here, and thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate this question because I think what Governor Polis was really trying to address for us is the need to have more affordable housing throughout our city and our region, and I strongly support that. But how we develop in the future really matters, and we know where we have to be developing that density is around our transit corridors, where we've already made investments in our transit system, our major bus routes, and the opportunity to do this, also includes then our ability to address our transportation challenges. So not only can we address affordability by where we build, but help transportation, air quality, climate, water use. So I strongly support more density, but where and how we do it, I think really matters. And frankly, I'm looking forward to being the mayor who helps build this right and get it right as we bring more affordability to our city.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, and thanks so much for being here. I think what is clear is we can't afford a Denver where Denverites can't afford to live, and that is increasingly becoming the case. Whether you are a teacher, whether you're a nurse, whether you're a server at a restaurant, more and more of the housing is becoming out of reach, which means we risk becoming a city that hollows out the very people that hold this city up. And so I think that means what we have to do is actually build housing that's going to be affordable and that's going to stay affordable, so people don't have to worry at the end of each month that potentially the landlord's going to come and jack that rent up one more time and you're going to get pushed out. And so I think what Governor Polis was after was how do we add more density, and I think that is critical for Denver. I've committed that I think we need to build 25,000 units over the next 8 years that would be permanently affordable. Permanently affordable means you never have to pay more than 30% of whatever you're making. So if you're a first-year teacher making $40,000 a year, you can just pay $1,000 a month and know you can stay in your unit, you can build a life here, and you can not worry about getting pushed out at the end of every month. That's the Denver we want, and that's the Denver I want to help build.
I have a follow-up question for both of you. I didn't hear you weigh in on, one of the most controversial parts of this plan was the ADUs and the multiplexes in residential, the single-family home, typically, areas. Can I hear your thoughts on that, on whether you are in favor of that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think Denver has already authorized 78,000 homes in our city that have approval to have an accessory dwelling unit in it. It makes a lot of sense. This is a good strategy to address gentrification issues that we have. So a family who already owns a home can put an accessory dwelling unit in their backyard and start to get revenue so they can stay on the property where they raise their kids. And frankly, with the increased assessments we all just got, I think this is even more important in the future. I would actually take it a step further, though. I don't think it's just enough to say you're authorized to build that accessory dwelling unit. I think in the communities who haven't been gentrified yet, we as a city can actually do more to ensure you can put those units in place, helping have the design done in advance so you can just copy the design, even have precision build products so they're less expensive, so 30 to 50% less expensive. So I would even take it further to make sure we can accomplish the goal.
Mike?
I do think ADUs can be an important part of the solution. I've talked to folks on the west side for whom this is actually a great way for people's kids who've grown up in this neighborhood and can't yet afford to buy a home or to rent a home. They're building ADUs, so that's a place where their family can stay together, and that young person, as they're finding their first job, can live in that ADU as they're working towards their own rental or their own home ownership. So it can be an important part of the solution. It's not the entire solution, and we know we're going to need more density in places to get the volume of units that we need, and those should go on places where we know it's easy to get access to public transit. Housing is also a climate strategy. If we build housing close to light rail, close to public transit, that's fewer people that have to drive, fewer that have to use cars, and easier for people to get to and from work, but more importantly, easier for us to reduce the amount of emissions we're putting out into the world at the same time.
Thank you. Do either of you have a rebuttal?
I don't.
All right. David?
Well, let's continue with affordable housing. Or the next question, David.
Thank you. While new rental apartments are going up constantly, very few for sale condos are being built. Some, like Zia in the nearby Sunnyside neighborhood, were promised to be for sale when permitted and built, only to flip to rentals once they were completed. What would your administration do to increase the housing stock of condos and other multifamily options? We'll begin with Mike.
Thank you. So I think this is going to be critically important to make sure everybody has a path to not just rent in Denver, but has a path to own in Denver. And right now what we know is if you can't own, you can't build a life, you can't pass on wealth to your kids into the next generation. And so one thing I would do is I would make sure both that we can help people get access to home ownership for the first time. We know one of the most important ways to do that is to help people get down payment assistance. So if you have a good job, you have income, and you have the credit, but you don't have $50,000 of savings sitting around to be able to get into your first home, that down down payment assistance helps you get into your home, build wealth, and be able to pass it on. I think in addition to that, we want to take on how we can build more for-sale condos. Many people know that's been a challenge for a long time because of some of the issues at the state level around the challenges of building condominiums. What I would do is actually help provide insurance for those builders that want to be able to build affordable condos, so we don't have the same construction defect issue that's prevailed for so long, keeping us from building entry-level units that can be great starter homes for people who want to buy their first home.
Thank you. Kelly.
Yeah, David, thanks for the question. You know, what changed my family's life was our ability to buy a home in 1989. And so many of our families can't buy that home today, and this is how we build wealth in this nation. Today, about 4% of the housing product in Denver are condos. In other cities like us, it's about 20%, which is exactly your point of we're removing an entire generation from home ownership opportunities. I would take responsibility to actually build the product we need. We've been waiting years to try to get an entry-level condo, and we haven't. So if you look at publicly owned land throughout our city, in particular surface parking lots that we own, you start to create a land bank or a land trust. Taking the price of the land out of that condo helps you get to affordability much quicker. And so with a partnership with either private developer like or a nonprofit developer like Habitat for Humanity, we could start to build a for-sale condo on our parking lots. Rec centers, libraries, police stations, firehouses, partner with Denver Public Schools, RTD. I think there's huge opportunity to bring homeownership back into our communities.
All right, thank you both, and thank you for still respecting our candidates' time. Let's keep rolling with affordable housing. Sean, with our next question.
Proposition 123 requires permits be approved in 90 days. This is the affordable housing proposition. In Denver, the turnaround time can be up to a year. How soon after taking office would you get permitting down to 90 days? A commitment. And how would you do it? Kelly?
Yeah, this is a huge challenge. I want to take 1 minute, Sean, to talk about Proposition 123. We all approved it. It creates funding based on excess above Tabor revenues at our state. And so that requires, you know, if we have a slowdown, there's less money there. There's also competition now in that Prop 123 money for education and for senior homestead, which is our property tax today. And more than ever, I think our seniors are going to need those resources. So there'll be pressure on that money beyond just the 90 days. Here's what I plan to do to get to 90 days, though. Our permitting times are probably well beyond 18 months, even for those that are just affordable housing, as the city drives toward it. I would hire contractors to come in and help us catch up, and then I would restructure the entire operation. So we take the siloed teams from the fire department, the Parks and Recs department, the building code, the transportation department. We create one department with one line of authority to force ourselves to really deliver the customer service that gets us to 90 days.
And how soon would you do that?
Yeah, I would do it immediately. The one challenge, I think, the hiring of contractors we can do immediately and begin the catch-up. The challenge is I believe I may need a charter change to one department and unsilo the operation.
Less than a year?
So yes, less than a year. I think I could do it.
Mike?
Thanks. Yeah, I was proud to be a part of building the coalition to pass Proposition 123. It took 260 organizations from across the state to come together for the first time to take on affordable housing as a real statewide crisis. And the good news is the budget is actually quite stable and predictable. There are more than $2.4 billion in that surplus right now, and that's growing over time as we know that economic growth is going to outpace the Tabor cap. And so that is stable and it's permanent. And so that's the important thing that we needed. It almost increases by about 5 times the amount of what the state was putting in to affordable housing before. We knew we needed more funding for housing. We also knew we needed more regulatory change, which was cities and counties have to be part of the solution. They have to actually move more quickly to get affordable housing permitted. That's why we put in place the 90-day requirement. And that is why it allows you to do that 90-day timeline for site development plans, for concept plans, for permits. And I've worked and talked to the city, county, and Denver. I think they're getting close to what's possible, and I'm very confident that we could, in the first 6 months, stand up a plan to be able to do that process of turnaround. And what 123 requires is for you to commit to that and then spend 3 years building it.
Kelly, do you have a rebuttal?
I don't know the last time this, so I will just say I met with planning directors and staff who have been in this office for the last 40 years, I don't think we've been under 90 days in that time frame. This is a real challenge. I'm committed to making it, but I think it's harder than maybe we're acknowledging here.
Mike?
Yeah, I agree. This requires a real change in direction and bold leadership to push to get it done. We also know that that's what cities around the state are doing. Colorado Springs is already doing it. Many other municipalities are already doing it. There are a couple things I would do to make it possible. Yes, I would add more staff to the office to make sure you can increase the capacity to do that. I think that's going to be critically important. And I would also make sure we have leadership of that department that sees their fundamental role as being a customer service facing organization where our job is to help you find a way to get to yes, not to help find a way to get to know.
So based on the ballot measure that will be going on, the property tax ballot measure, it restructures our Tabor cap, so to speak, because it adds the 1%. So there is some concern that over time there won't be that surplus there anymore because every year that cap goes up. How confident are you 5 years out, let's say, that we'll still have revenue over that cap?
Yeah, so all the projections show that that cap is large now and is growing structurally over time because what you have is, what you see is income is growing around the state faster than inflation is. And so that is the neighbor how the Tabor cap is structured. And so it's going to continue growing as the state prospers. We've bet on the state previously and the state will continue to grow and prosper. But what that means is that we know you'll have resources and any changes that come after Prop 123 are after in line from that initial change. So these dollars will come out immediately. It would require legislative change to go back and undo that, which I don't think any legislature in Colorado is going to push to undo what we know is the most significant challenge the state is facing, which is affordable housing.
Same response to that question?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I balanced the budget in response to the Great Recession in 2009. I think every economist you talk with today says we're highly likely in for a slowdown. And I think, you know, to me, the way you build a budget and manage to it is you really think about what's the most realistic challenge before you, and you start to build your budget around that. And I don't think we should bank on Prop 123 being able to deliver everything we need in terms of housing. If it's there, we'll get it. But I don't think we're going to have the kind of resources there that we really need to address our affordable housing crisis. And I think that's why you need to have a much broader range of plans like I'm offering.
All right, let's continue the affordable housing topic with one more question from David.
Thank you. 1 in 7 homes sold in Denver last year was sold to an investor. Homes that are under $500,000 are the most likely to be investor purchased and not owner occupied. This has caused displacement of Latino families in our community trying to purchase homes and an overall shortage of starter and working class home options. Do you feel the percentage of investor-owned homes is a problem? And if so, what would your administration do about it? Begin with Mike.
I do believe this is a problem. And we see this around the city where we have people who've worked hard for a long time and saved up a down payment can't compete with an investor or a bank who's going to come in and pay above asking price and play an all-cash offer, and even harder for those families to get access to those homes and keep them. And so I do think we have to look at ways that we can take action on those, including requiring that they be that you have a permanent resident that is involved in that is staying in those homes, and you're not being able to do Airbnb or VRBOs out on properties, so you don't have investment properties. It also means working with neighborhoods to make sure we can help people get access to those homes up front. It means things like down payment assistance make a big difference so families can get into those homes. It also means partnering with land trusts. These are opportunities for us to acquire land that are owned by nonprofits. Those lands are then, the land is owned by the nonprofit, but a person can buy the home and then keep it as long as they want. And when they resell it, that nonprofit has the right of first refusal to sell it to the next owner and to keep it affordable. So I think this is going to require an all of the above strategy to make sure we're doing everything we can to keep homes in the range of families who need them.
Yeah, David, I actually saw a statistic that 1 in 4 of the single-family homes in our state are being purchased by outside speculators. So the numbers are incredibly eye-opening. And when you take those products off, it simply means there's less product for us to buy and people to live in their own city. And it's escalating prices for rent because that's what's happening with those homes. I think there's a few strategies we've seen that can work. I was the chair of Habitat for Humanity on the board for a number of years. And one of the things we would do there is when those properties were transitioning, we would take first right of refusal to buy it back and then resell it to be able to keep it as an affordable property in our city. I think we could look at things like that. Other states are looking at issues, though, where could you charge a fee for if you hold a certain amount of real estate, particularly single-family homes, and you're simply a speculator? Is there an increased cost so you make it less appealing for speculators to be buying our homes?
Thank you.
All right, let's keep moving on to the next topic. Our next topic will be homelessness, obviously a huge topic in Denver. Let's get to a couple questions on this one. Sean, please start us off.
So many people who are living on the street right now are there because of drug addictions. Does your plan, in terms of dealing with the homeless, include incentives for treatment? And if so, what do they look like? What if an individual refuses treatment? Do you still give them a tiny home or an apartment for free to live in? Mike?
I think the place to start is no one in Denver should have to be homeless, right? We have a moral obligation to make sure we can fundamentally connect people to the services they need to get their lives back together. And we know we can do that, and we know that it works. You know, I was sitting outside of one of our shelters talking to a gentleman who was sitting there with a hard hat in his bag as he was waiting in the food line, and he was telling me about how he did 2 tours in Iraq, came back to Colorado, got injured, then got addicted to opioids, and now is trying to recover from that. But at the same time that he has to find a way to get to a methadone clinic every day for treatment, he also has to be out at the construction site at the same time to get access to work. We know we can do a better job of supporting folks like this who need access both to treatment and to services, and that's why my proposal, which focuses on building these micro-communities that offer people the chance to live in safe, dignified, stable homes, also puts right on those sites the wraparound services people need, like addiction treatment, like mental health support, like workforce training, in an environment where you're much more likely to receive those services when your basic needs of knowing you're not going to freeze to death at night are taken care of.
Kelly?
Sean, you know, my family has struggled with addiction. My daughters and I lost their father to suicide ultimately after 25 years of an addiction. I share that because I think sometimes we talk about addiction as if it's a willpower issue, as if it's something that people choose, and yet I've seen the lives where it doesn't always feel like a choice to people. And so for me, getting people to safer locations and not making sobriety part of a barrier to that is the first step. But I also know that we don't have the kind of supports and services to help if every single person who is struggling with an addiction today said they want our assistance, we know we don't have enough beds or support and service for them. So for me, I think this is almost a recognition of the reality of both of those things. Get them to safer locations while we build the capacity to provide the support and service so we can help them deal with the addiction they have and find a path to a future.
Any rebuttal?
Yes. I would just add that I think one of the things we see is we are placing people with current needs in locations where they're not going to get better. What we know is often what we see is if you talk to people in the county jail, they'll say they have numbers of folks that are there that have major addiction needs and are sitting in a jail cell and not actually getting the treatment they need to succeed. What we need to do is actually change what our system does to support that, to stop the revolving door of being on the street for 2 days, then in Denver Health for a day in the ER, then in jail. That's why I would convert part of our county jail to actually become the inpatient addiction-based treatment centers that we need and inpatient mental health services that we need, where there is dramatic demand, but we don't actually have the beds to provide those services.
Thank you. Kelly, response?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a direction we head, but the reality is we have programs like this right now in our jails. We're utilizing them. I think we're so short-staffed in our jails. We're 30% down on our deputy sheriffs. I mean, I do think we have to look at the realistic challenge before us, and I don't think it's going to be as simple as everybody gets treatment immediately when they need it or want it even. And I think that's why I'm focused as a region of coming together with other cities throughout this region to say we put our resources together to try to address this challenge.
Let's continue with our topic of homelessness. David, for the next question.
Thank you. What role should the police play in dispersing non-sanctioned encampments? Mike, you've referred to evicting the unhoused from tents. Where would those folks end up? And for both of you, when is it appropriate to arrest someone who is homeless? We'll begin with Mike.
Great. I do not believe that arresting people for being homeless is the right strategy. And I think that the way that we focus on this is what we know is the first priority has to be getting people to housing, getting people into housing that we know offers the stability, the safety, the dignity they need, so they're not stuck in freezing rain on a night like this or freezing to death in the middle of a cold winter. I think that's priority one. And what we know is that the great majority of people, if offered access to those services, will take them. I think the myth is that people don't want to move off of the street into dignified housing. We've proven over and over again that that's false. People don't always want to go into a shelter setting where you're in a gym floor with 80 other people and don't know if someone has a weapon next to you or if they're using drugs, and it doesn't always feel safe. They will go into housing that provides safety and stability, and that's what I would push for. I think there are times when you're going to have to move encampments because there are safety or health risks, and that is always still an opportunity. But I think what we want to do is give people access to housing that is dignified and then give them the chances to go to that so that they can succeed.
Kelly?
For me, this is about the humanitarian crisis we find ourselves in with people who are unhoused in our city. Last year, 173 people died who are unhoused. The year before, 269. I see the urgency in getting people to safer locations. So I would sanction safe outdoor sites so we could get everyone to a safer location. I'd use outreach workers to do that work. It's pretty clear when you talk with someone who's unhoused today, the vast majority will go together with their partners, with their... You didn't, Siri? Seriously, I thought I was making total sense. They'll go with their, if you can keep them with the community they've formed while they're living unhoused and with their partners, we can get them to safer locations. And I think it's critically important. I also think this notion of leaving people to fend for themselves, people who can't take care of themselves. So I would take people to Denver Cares where we have detox and can assist somebody who's on drugs and struggling. And if I had to save someone's life, I would arrest someone.
Thank you.
Okay, moving forward, we're going up. Rebuttal, Mike?
I just say on this topic, I think like many of the biggest problems we face, the most significant mistake we can make is believing that somehow these problems are unsolvable. Actually, they're not unsolvable. We know what works. We've seen evidence of what works. What we have to do is commit ourselves to the bold plans to make sure those things can work at scale. I look at examples where the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless has provided housing units like this to people, and more than 300 people have moved to those units. A year later, more than 86% of them are still housed. We know there's a path to make this housing and the wraparound services with a sense of community work. We got to commit ourselves as a city to actually do that.
Cal?
I totally agree with Michael. I think, when you look around cities in this nation, there are a number of cities doing a much better job at housing and sheltering people. And so I'm always happy to steal the very best ideas and bring them home. And what is clear to me is focusing on this as a region and working together, focusing on prevention and using good information to make decisions about how we build our system to meet the needs of people who are unhoused. I absolutely believe we can make headway on this issue.
Okay, let's continue. We'll go to our next topic. Our next topic, of course, crime. These are the big headliners. No big surprises here for a Denver Mayoral Debate. David's going to start this round with our first question to Kelly.
Thank you. When asked about property crime at a recent debate here at Regis, District 1 Councilwoman Amanda Sandoval, who represents this area, said, quote, "What I'm hearing from the police departments is they're stopping criminals. They're passing them along to the district attorney and charges are not being filed. That's a failure of our system, first and foremost." Do you agree with that statement by Councilwoman Sandoval that the DA's office carries a lot of the blame? How would you use the power of the mayor's office to address that issue? Kelly.
So I'll start by saying how honored I am to have the almost 1,500 Denver police officers endorse me. And we have had conversations about this issue, but I've also met with the district attorney, Beth McCann, and talked about the challenges we face. And I think what's happening today is when you talk with Beth, she'll say there's concerns about maybe how the officers are filing the paperwork, or there's concerns about the judicial branch. And when you talk to the judicial branch, they may say the legislative branch is the problem. And I think as our residents, you're getting a lot of this. What I would do as mayor is convene a regular meeting with the district attorney, the police chief, the mayor, the manager of safety, the presiding judge, the president of city council. And I'd ask the question, how are we doing addressing making our city safe for everyone in it? Who needs to improve what we're each doing? And let's hold each other accountable to get it done. And I would stop blaming someone else and find a path forward that makes your city safe.
What's so clear to me is you can't feel joy in a city where you don't feel safe. And right now, I hear from neighbors all over the city that they don't feel safe. And that's true around your garage getting broken into to have your bike stolen, or your car getting stolen out of your front yard, or the family that came out of their front yard to put their kids into carpool and someone was stealing the car, and then shots got fired back at the kids and at the house as they were loading into carpool. Like, that's not a city that anybody feels safe in, and there's more work to be done to get us to a place where we do feel safe. I do think part of the breakdown is around the failure to align all of the different agencies that do this work, making sure that what officers are doing is what DAs are following up on, is what judges are sentencing, and is what correctional facilities are serving. And right now, I think what we do not have is alignment across that spectrum. And this is why I think what we'll hear across that continuum is in many places we don't have either the right first responder responding to the right incident at the right time, or the right person being sent to the right facility for the right service. What we have to do is align those things to make sure you're getting the right service in the right place from the right first responder.
Thank you, Mike. Let's continue. The next question from Sean.
This recent analysis shows Denver's average monthly crime rate was 43% higher last year than in 2019. And District 9 had 20% of all crime, even though it has about 9% of the population. To what degree do you think local and/or state policy changes have impacted these trends, and where would you start to address the growing problem? I think we start with Mike this time.
Yep.
So I do think there are always whenever the state takes action on criminal justice, it has a dramatic impact on Denver because we're the largest city and we have often the largest challenges with crime. I don't think that provides an excuse for us not to do anything else to be able to solve this problem. And so I think what we can do to actually directly make steps on crime are to say, how do we, as I was describing, build up the first responder force we need to respond to incidents as they arise? I'll give you an example. Right now, what we know is that if you have someone who's in a mental health crisis, the worst person you can send to that situation is a police officer. That's actually far more likely to exacerbate that person's crisis than to help moderate it. And so what we want to do is make sure you have, if someone's in a mental health crisis, a mental health responder. You want to make sure if you have someone at risk of an overdose, you're sending a paramedic or an EMT. And that means you can actually reserve those officers to respond to the places where you do have violent crime or property crimes. And right now, they're so overwhelmed by the number of calls that may not be directly suited to them, they can't actually respond to those calls. It means we both have to restore the force and recruit and train and deploy officers in a way that they can do real community-based policing. But I think we got to do both.
Thank you. Kelly?
I agree with sending the right responder to the right issue. I would increase our mental health responders to make sure we have the right person going. But I want to hit directly on the question you asked, Sean, about how do you have that feedback loop to make sure we're improving our safe city. I did a ride-along Saturday night with the police department and got the chance. It was in Lodo, so it was in District 6, which is downtown Denver. And I got the chance to ask the officers specifically what would help address some of the crime and challenges you're facing. No surprise to all of us, but every single officer I spoke with said, we really have to address the let out of our bars. We know that is a huge problem, and we would strongly support even trying some different strategies to address that issue. All to say, I think our officers have really good insights. A second example would be our officers know exactly where the hot spots are in our city. And you can sometimes address those hotspots instead of just responding to calls, but start to look at, could we address the lighting? Could we address the hours of operation that could make it a safer area?
Thank you. Roberto?
Yeah, I think one of the other important areas of focus here is how do you actually get officers back to the work of building relationships and building community? And that means deploying them in jobs where they're doing real community-based policing. That means actually out walking a beat where you're talking to neighbors, you're knocking doors, you're talking to business leaders, and you're present in a way that you build relationships. When I was a school principal, that's what you do, is you walk the halls before anybody decides to come out of class and ditch school. So you're there to say, oh, let me help you get back to class. I know you were lost. It turns out that same kind of relationship building is what you can do as officers. If we have a fully staffed police force, they actually have the capacity to do that. Right now, they're so overworked they can't.
Thank you. Kelly, response?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. Let's move forward to the next question on our topic of crime. David?
Denver continues to have a police brutality problem, as evident by the payouts that the city makes. One of the most publicized cases, of course, was last year when police officers fired into a crowd in Lodo. How would your administration reform the police to reduce or ideally eliminate excessive force problems? And Kelly, is your endorsement from the Police Protective Association a double-edged sword? We'll start with you.
No, I don't think it's a double-edged sword at all. As a matter of fact, I think you need a mayor that can form a relationship both with community and with our officers if we're going to figure out how to make progress on these issues. Long before I was endorsed by the police officers, I talked about specifically what happened in Lodo, that I think the grand jury got it right. And I think what our officers want and our community desires is a mayor who's willing to make that call to both support our officers and hold them accountable. And I think in our history, we have assumed it's one or the other. And I know as mayor, it has to be both of those things. And I think some of the things for our officers require that we're able to pull them off of working and responding constantly to calls to actually have training and feedback so our officers can see how to improve their behaviors before we're in a crisis or a major incident. I also think when we're hiring officers, we need to focus more on these issues so we're screening and looking for officers who are open to learning. And finally, we have to shift the culture in our police department to one of continually getting feedback and transparency.
Thank you, Kelly. Mike?
Yeah, I think we need to do two things. I think the mayor needs to first lead a very visible public campaign to say we need the best and the brightest Denverites to want to come and do this job. It is a highly dignified, noble, important profession that needs you. And the second thing is we need to set incredibly high expectations about the responsibility those law enforcement officials have to treat all of the citizens with respect. And I think it is completely possible to do both. And I think that goes to both how we recruit officers, focusing on recruiting more officers from the neighborhoods that they serve directly, how we train them, how we focus on things like learning the skills of de-escalation, how you make sure you know how to take a high conflict situation and make it low conflict, and how you deploy them to a different kind of work, which is if your job is really about walking beats, being in neighborhood, building relationships, talking to neighbors, that is a different call to service than people might see as one that is another tour of duty like it might have been to do a tour in Iraq. This is about public service in the truest form, and we can both set high standards, hold people accountable, and really celebrate the profession as critical to getting back a safe city.
Thank you. Let's move on. The question from Sean.
I want to follow up on, since both of you have touched on this recruitment and retention of officers. Now, parents recently surveyed by Denver Public Schools ranked school resource officers as the best way to improve school safety. So first question, do you agree? If so, how would you specifically recruit and retain more officers, since as both of you, I think, have touched on, there aren't even enough to handle the calls we've got now. Would you create a recruitment and retention bonus? If so, what would it look like? And who do we, Kelly?
Sure. I forgot, was the first part of the question, do I think SROs are a good idea? Yeah, I have strongly supported schools being allowed to make a determination about if a school resource officer makes the most sense for them. I know the school board feels we have to have, an across-the-board policy, but I actually don't. I think school by school, we're capable of being able to decide, is it a mental health professional or a school resource officer? If it's a school resource officer, what does it look like? That said, I've talked with officers in the department about the potential, maybe even for our retired officers to come back and serve in some of this capacity while we're trying to ramp up our officers. We've also talked about ways we can free our officers up to do more of the critical work, including SROs, and that's using technology, where we can relieve our officers from some of the things they do today. Technology that could slow us down in school zones, maybe that could actually make us stop at those stoplights and stop signs, issues like that to free them up.
Mike?
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, from my experience as a school principal, there are three things that matter a lot on safety. One is prevention. First is you got to make sure you get young people access to all the positive peer groups they can so they connect to those things that are their passion before they get into negative peer groups. That means things like after school and summer school programming, I would expand. The second is intervention. When you have a young person who starts to get into trouble, you have to be able to then provide all the wraparound services he or she needs to get back on track. I've run schools and juvenile detention centers. I've run schools for kids that have serious criminal backgrounds. Those kids need a whole lot more support and structure. That means sometimes the best environment for them is not a 3,000 student comprehensive high school. We can provide them great supportive educations in environments that are going to be much more successful for them than letting them fend for themselves in large comprehensive high schools. And the third is resource officers. But I ran a school that had a school resource officer. I ran a school that had a social worker. I think school leaders and communities can make that decision. I think we ought to be able to support them in making that decision so they get the best security that they feel fits their community.
To both of you, real quick, so would you offer bonuses for retention, recruitment and retention? Kelly?
Yeah, so we just had an academy graduation about 3 weeks ago. I attended the graduation. 36 officers came out onto our streets to serve us. When you talk with those new officers, they'll tell you it was someone who served that encouraged them to apply and caused them to apply. I'd focus on, could I get our existing officers to assist us in trying to recruit the sort of talent we're looking for next?
Oh, no.
Not yet, but maybe.
Okay.
I think particularly you were asking about school resource officers.
Well, no, officers in general.
Yeah. That wouldn't be my first step. My first step is to make it much easier for us to recruit and train those officers. Right now, we know it's incredibly long and cumbersome process to be able to get someone through Civil Service Commission to get appointed as an officer. That's a huge detractor. And I think the other bigger one is to actually provide the public sword and backing for officers to know that they have our support on the job, and this is a community that's here to support them as they're supporting us. And I do think when it comes to school resource officers, what's critically important is you can't just throw any random officer into a school. You have to have people who deeply want to do this job, because you have to be able to want to be there when two ninth grade girls are having an all-out fight that feels like the end of the world to them, and you got to be there for that conversation. Or when you have a 17-year-old boy who's been kicked out of his home and doesn't know what to do tonight, you got to be there for that conversation, and that takes a special type of officer. So it's not just a matter of having those officers, it's a matter of making sure they are called to doing the kind of work that this school will call them to do.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to our next topic. This one's a little more unique. We realize as the mayor of Denver, the next mayor of Denver is in this room. We just don't know who it is yet. It is a political position. You'll be governing. These are questions about governing, about politics. Sean's going to kick us off with the first question on this topic.
It's a timely one. According to Mayor Hancock, who held a press conference today on this, Denver has now helped 10,000 migrants at a cost of $16 million over the last 4 months alone. He says the city is at a breaking point, and unless it receives help, the next mayor will need to cut city services to handle the continued influx of migrants. How do you plan to address this situation, and how would you prioritize the cuts should you have to make them? Also, would you continue the city's policy of only providing emergency shelter to those who've met with immigration officials prior to arriving here?
Starting with Mike.
Mike?
Thank you. We have always been a country of immigrants, and we are working hard to continue to be one. And I think that should stay a part of our values. I was down there 2 days ago and spent some time talking to all the migrants that have arrived and hearing their stories, and it's clear these are people that want the same thing everyone else here wants. They want to be able to work and support their family and live the American dream. And there's a lot that we can do better to help deliver on that for them. I think that requires better coordination of state action and better coordination of federal action. So I'll tell you, the first thing I would do is right now, every one of the folks that are coming up here are being bused directly from El Paso. El Paso has a plan, which is we just put you on a bus and send you to Denver. And about 75% of those folks want to go someplace other than Denver. They're trying to get to see family in Chicago or in LA or in New York, and this was just the bus they got sent to. And so we can first start partnering with those places to say, let's talk earlier about where these people are trying to go and help them get to where they're going. And then the biggest problem here really is that what you have is people in this country who want to work, and by the way, employers in this city who want to hire them, and a federal government that can't solve that problem. What I would do is actually call the federal government to work on how we solve that problem, which I will come back to in my next rebuttal.
Thank you. Kelly?
I volunteered at Rudy Park Rec Center and met a number of migrants who were coming. The first question, and it was mostly young men I met with, probably 30 to 40 of them, they asked, where can I work? I think we should be proud of how our city is handling this situation, but it's not sustainable. I think not only should our federal delegation be assisting us in getting the emergency funding that we do qualify for today as quickly as possible, but I think we have to recognize as a nation that allowing people legally, who are coming here legally under our rules, seeking asylum, and not allowing to work while we sort out their status is only setting them up to fail and our cities up to fail. We have to allow people to work.
Mike, you had a rebuttal.
Yeah, I think this is easy solution for the federal government to solve. I would call Secretary Mayorkas and I would say what we need are temporary protective status orders for these people that are here and that want to work. While the government is figuring it out, let them actually work and contribute to our community and contribute to their own wealth. This is only a crisis because we won't let them work to be able to pay for the services they need. So we have to pay for the services they can't pay for themselves. They're very proud individuals. They want to be able to support themselves. We're standing in the way, and we should call on Biden and Mayorkas to change that policy to let these folks help themselves and help our communities.
Kelly,
Yes. Same what I said.
let's move on our governing topic. David.
Thank you. This one's also a little long. Questions about problematic ties have popped up during this campaign. Mike, it's been reported you are a member of Skull and Bones, an organization of powerful, historically white men from Yale. Reid Hoffman, who donated almost $800,000 in support of your campaign, has very public ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Kelly, you headed up the Chamber of Commerce, which has historical ties to some of Denver's most racist history, including the KKK. You also have a staff member who pled guilty for firing a handgun at a sex worker. How have either of you addressed the history of organizations you've been part of, and how would you explain your current problematic ties?
Starting with Kelly.
Kelly.
Great. So first I will say, my whole life I have believed in fair chance hiring. I believe everybody gets another chance. I did this at the Chamber of Commerce. I continued to do it in my campaign, and I'll do it when I'm your mayor. So that's on the second issue you raised. On the first issue, we also have had a mayor. So I guess I'm going for a job that has a history with Ku Klux Klan connections. The difference I look at, though, in terms of the Chamber of Commerce is everything about the Chamber of Commerce is public. You know who the board of directors is today. You know what the annual report says about the organization, where it's spending its time and its money. You know who contributes to it. You know who runs it, and you know what the public positions are. And so while I think all of us would like to change parts of history, the part we do control is the part today. And I do think I take responsibility in both of those spaces for the choices and actions I've made, both at the chamber and in my campaign.
Mike.
Thanks. I've joined organizations that I believe are diverse and inclusive, and I would make sure that those are what I plan to get done in the city of Denver, which is how do we focus on making sure everyone who's unhoused has access to a home and services? How do we make sure everybody in the city can afford to still live here? And how do we make sure we provide a city that's going to be safe for everybody that wants to be able to grow their lives here? That's what I've been committed to. That's what I've lived a life of service doing, and that's what I would do as mayor.
Follow-up? Go ahead, David.
And Mike, to the second half of that question, the largest donor to your campaign, who's given almost $800,000, has been very publicly tied to Jeffrey Epstein, and I would like you to respond to that.
Yeah, so the folks that have supported my campaign are people that have supported progressive races around the country. It was also a large donor to defeat Donald Trump in the presidential election. So I've had the chance to work on coalitions around big issues that I care about, whether that is immigration reform, whether that is universal preschool, whether that is affordable housing. Those are folks that care about those progressive issues and want to see those progressive issues be successful in cities like Denver. I am proud that they want to be able to make sure that Denver can be a proof point to be able to deliver results on things that are vexing cities all around the country. I account for the work that I'll do and how I'll do it, and that's all I can control.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on.
So to each of you, Kelly, you have a long time personal relationship with a lobbyist. Mike, you're married to a deputy district attorney. So how do you each plan to manage potential conflicts of interest that may arise from these relationships? Mike?
Start with Mike.
I don't see it as a conflict of interest. I see it as we both have lived lives committed to public service, and we work in different parts of the city. I obviously don't hire the district attorney. I don't hire the chief deputies that work for them. Beth McCann's a publicly elected DA, and she makes the decisions about her own team and her own office. And so for me, I've had a chance to learn a great deal from my wife, and her perspective on public safety in the city has been an invaluable contribution to how I see the world. But I think we've lived lives in public service in different roles and always been able to find a way to have our own careers and keep the space between them, and I don't see any change in that if I were to be the mayor.
I think when we're talking about crime, and just a little bit ago, we talked about how some officers say, well, the problem is with the DA's office, and the DA's office isn't bringing the charges. So handling things like that.
My wife is quite confident about telling me when I'm doing things wrong in any location, either in the house or in my public career. And so I feel like we have a relationship where if I think there's a structural decision that the DAs are making that is incorrect, I'll be happy to talk to Beth McCann about it and probably talk to Courtney about it also.
Thanks. Kelly?
Can I just add a piece to that? I don't know if either of you are aware of this, but when the mayor builds the budget, you actually build the budget for the district attorney's office as well. I used to work with Mitch Morrissey on that, just as an additional piece.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
Okay. About David. Last summer when I was trying to decide if I was going to run, the first thing David said is, I won't represent any clients and I won't do any business with the city. He's already notified his clients as such, and so conflict removed.
Okay.
Any rebuttal?
Oh.
Okay.
David.
Thank you. Both of you are seen as fairly moderate or centrist candidates. You'll likely be working with a council that is a bit more progressive. The third place finisher in this race, Dr. Lisa Calderon, has so far chosen to stay out. What would either of you say to Calderon or her voters to gain their support? Begin with Kelly.
Start with Kelly.
Yeah, you know, I think for me, I think this is a progressive city. And so I don't see necessarily a distinction between the role the mayor plays, or a progressive mayor and a progressive city council. What I would say to voters who want to make sure they're electing a mayor who addresses their greatest concerns, especially if I'll try to use the word progressive from the point of view I think you're using it, I would tell them this is critical, where you have a mayor who's able to hold our police department accountable and at the same time support them to do the work we need them to do. It's critical we have a mayor who's committed to housing and sheltering people in our city. It's committed we have a mayor who helps figure out how our Denver Public Schools delivers the education our kids deserve and keeps them safe while they do it. And those are all roles that I'm confident I'll play, and play in a manner with honor and, frankly, carrying the values forward of a progressive city.
Mike?
Thank you. I mean, I would say to Dr. Calderon and to her supporters, I think a lot of her supporters were frustrated with how the city is operating now, and they want to see change, and they want to see bold change. And I'm committed to that same truth. I think what we know is we want to make sure that we fundamentally can focus on people that are unhoused getting access to housing. That's a commitment that she and I both shared in this campaign. We want to make sure that those communities that are being most disserved by our current policies and practices are the first ones we have at the table to help build the solutions it's going to take to move the city forward. That was why I had an office in North Park Hill for 10 years, to be able to be in that kind of conversation with community leaders who feel like they haven't been heard. And I think she wants to make sure that we have a real lens on equity, how we're making sure this doesn't become two Denvers, where it's a city where some neighborhoods are thriving and doing wonderfully well, and others are really struggling and getting no access to services. I think I've come out with a bold set of plans around how we can make sure this city focuses on equity and everything we do, from education to economic development to housing to new development, and I'll stay committed to those things.
Okay, we're moving forward. An hour goes by quickly. We have one more topic, and we're going to go with some shorter answers in this one. So I'm going to ask both candidates for a 30-second answer to a question about either the environment or transportation. David, our first question.
Thank you. Sheridan, Federal, and Colfax. These three streets have some of the most injuries and deaths for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers alike. What can you do to make these roads and the rest of our city safer?
Start with Mike.
Thank you. This is a real crisis for the city. Pedestrian deaths are continuing to increase, and we know our plan to get to Vision Zero, which was no pedestrian deaths, has been dramatically unsuccessful. I think there are a couple of things we can do. One is we want to try to create more incentives for people to get out of their vehicles and into public transit. That means more buses. Oh, we're very fast now. That means more buses and more public transit and more accessible bike lanes, and now I'm out of time.
We appreciate the shortening of time here. Kelly.
It comes fast.
Yeah, I think the opportunity is to focus on especially those three corridors, bus, rapid transit, that we help transition people to alternatives than just driving their cars. We also know the greatest deaths are happening at specific intersections along all three of those corridors. I'd really focus energy on those intersections and making improvements that save lives.
Thank you. Sean?
So the next mayor will be involved in renegotiating the city's contract with Excel, which only happens once every 50 years. So what do you specifically want included that's not included now? And as part of the negotiations, how will you press Excel to transition its natural gas customers, infrastructure, and business to sustainable alternatives? Kelly?
Yeah, I think with Excel, we have to absolutely focus on the priority of addressing climate and a transition, but also the thing I'd really focus on is making sure the customers in Denver, I'm putting at the forefront the cost of what they pay for it, so that what we negotiate with Excel in that franchise agreement recognizes we're not putting a disproportionate impact on our own residents to make that transition.
Mike?
I would say the utility bills are too damn high. That would be my first statement. I think what people know is we have to do two things. One is focused on how we control cost, and the second is focused on how we really accelerate our transition to renewable energy, because we know that's going to be not just cheaper for families immediately, it's going to be critically important for us long-term in terms of our public health and public wellness. We can't get cleaner air and cleaner water without fundamentally committing to much more aggressive action on getting to more renewable energy.
As I alluded to before, an hour goes by quickly, especially in a great event like this. We're going to go to our closing statements. A reminder for our audience, that's a 1-minute closing statement we've asked of each candidate. We determine our order via a coin flip before the debate. Mike Johnston, please offer your first, you're up first for your 1-minute closing statement.
Thank you all so much for being here tonight. We will head out, even though it's in the rain, into a city that we all love tonight. But we will also head out into a city that has some hard truths tonight, which is tonight there will be a mom like the one I talked to who is sitting with a 15-year-old son who is not sure he wants to go back to high school tomorrow in person because he'd rather stay home and be remote learning, because at least he knows if he's remote learning, he feels safe. We'll have families sitting around a table with their kids who are worried at the end of the month the rent's going to go up one more time and they won't be able to stay in the place they call home. And we'll have 1,400 people walking around the streets of Denver tonight trying to find a bridge to sleep under or a sidewalk to sleep on. What is possible in this city is to deliver a fundamentally different vision of what we can do and how we can commit to being both a great city and a good city. A city that makes sure we are going to be big enough to house all of us, to include all of us, and to protect all of us. That's the Denver that we want to build, and I would love your help in making that a reality. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. Kelly Brough, your 1-minute closing statement.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. You know, every beautiful thing I have in my life came because I chose Denver as my family's home. I raised 2 daughters here. I got to own a home, which changed my life. I got good jobs. We started small businesses. Every single good thing that I have comes because we chose Denver. But I know that feels at risk for so many of our residents today. Those same things aren't available to so many of us. And I know this. I have the experience to be able to deliver on that vision so all of us can stand here someday and say every beautiful thing I have came because I chose Denver. And I know my experience being Chief of Staff to John Hickenlooper will allow me on day one to deliver on that. But even more so, as a first-time candidate, I'm honored by the people who have said to me, we also believe you can do this, Kelly. We trust you, and we see your future here. So to Mayor Wellington Webb and Wilma Webb, Governor Ritter, the 6 candidates I shared this stage with who have endorsed me, the 1,500 police officers, and now I hope you will endorse me, and I couldn't list all my endorsements. I ran out of time. Thank you.
Please join me in thanking our candidates for the time tonight. I'd like to thank our live audience here for joining us. I, of course, want to echo their thanks for our candidates spending the time. And running for office is not for the faint of heart. That we have people willing to go through this marathon is a fantastic thing about the city of Denver and for our community. I also want to thank 2 very important people tonight. The only 2 people that worked harder than our candidates tonight were our timers, Nora and Emma. Thank you very much. Remember, everybody, Election Day is June 6th. The ballots get mailed out on May 15th, just a couple of days away. Get involved. Be sure to vote. Be sure to have your voice heard. We are grateful to everyone here, all the neighborhood organizations that came together along with Regis University and CBS News Colorado to make sure we could provide this debate to all of you, both our live audience and our audience at home. For everybody at Regis University, CBS News Colorado, and all of our neighborhood organizations, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.